The Underworld Cave Initiation. Welcome back to another episode of Wild Feminine Magic. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get into the video. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek, said Carl Jung, of the human need to descend into the unconscious mind and seek its treasure. The cave is a place of power and rebirth. It is where our ancient ancestors saw the bear hibernate in winter and re-emerge in spring. This ancient seasonal cycle of winter death and spring renewal was also the soul's cycle of ego death and soul renewal, and the cave is where this mystery unfolded. In the cave begins our initiation and descent into a subconscious world of memories, past lives, ancestral karma, past hurts and wounds, heartbreak, and it is where our greatest fear lies. Our greatest wound. This is the realm of the goddess, the Dark Mother. She takes you by the hand and sets you forth as you enter the underworld, one gate at a time. In the cave, you meet your greatest fears and confront them in the barren landscape of death and winter. The Dark Goddess is known to be in the cave at this time, helping the death rebirth process. As the winter solstice brings the new solar king, a rebirth must happen. The old king dies and a new one is crowned. The old self dies and the true one is found. The Dark Goddess is the mother who rules the rebirth process, and in this unknown realm, anything can happen and anything does happen. She is the Black Madonna, often worshipped in caves in Spain, France, Greece, England, Scotland, and Ireland. From megalithic temple cave sites like Malta and Newgrange to Montserrat, Languedoc, Ibiza, the Black Madonna is prevalent across Europe. Since Paleolithic times, the cave was the temple. The cave represents the womb tomb, where your ego dies and where your soul is reborn. We know the epic story of Inanna, who enters the cave underworld. The great Sumerian goddess of heaven, Inanna goes on this journey, leaving one item at each of the 7 gates until she arrives at the 8th and final gate, where she surrenders completely. Her sister, 𝐦𝐨𝐬𝐤, queen of the underworld, oversees the process of Inanna's surrender. Like a snake, she sheds her old skin. For 9 nights she hangs in total surrender. This surrender to her greatest limitation brings her face to face with all that she thought made her a queen and a woman in the patriarchal world, and yet it was not her truth or true nature. In the cave she weeps. In the cave she has no servants. In the cave, she howls and no one comes for her. She listens deeply to her fears and her pain. To the pain of many others who were also in the cave. On the 10th night she awakens and understands. Her fears no longer controlled her. She had listened to them and learned from them. She has compassion for them. She returns and rises through each of the gates, resurrected and reborn with new wisdom to rule her kingdom. Joseph Campbell in The Hero's Journey calls the cave the point on the hero's journey where the hero descends into the abyss. This is where the hero or heroine confronts his or her greatest fear. This is where a supreme ordeal takes place. And this is where liberation happens. What happens to Inanna in the cave? Inanna faces her shadow and goes through an alchemical process of shadow integration, where she brings the hidden parts of herself into conscious awareness. Shadow describes the repressed or denied parts of the self that remain hidden in our unconscious mind. Shadow includes fears, complexes, phobias, and attachments that live outside the light of our awareness. When we successfully integrate the shadow, we create a bridge between our conscious and unconscious mind, holding hidden, negative parts of the psyche. Surprisingly, the shadow holds hidden gifts and our greatness as well. Once we accept our negative parts, we liberate the greatness that was trapped below. We recover our deepest passions, unique expression and aliveness, which leads to vitality, authenticity, and the freedom of being our true self. How does Inanna teach us to liberate? How does she get to know and integrate her dark side? She comes into acceptance of the opposing archetypal energies inside her. As long as Inanna is afraid of her shadow, symbolized by 𝐦𝐸𝐤𝐿, her ego will remain stuck in the fear-ridden axis between the 2 shadows and act out one of them. Once Inanna learns to access 𝐸𝐸𝐿's energy, she also gets access to the power of transmutation, alchemy, and liberation. In short, an ego who has not learned to properly access an archetype will be possessed by that archetype's shadows. Inanna learns from her shadow, from its wounds, complexes and patterns, and she makes the unconscious conscious, mother-whore complex. She balances opposing forces where she desires and fears something at the same time. She becomes more compassionate of 𝐦𝐨𝐬𝐵𝐞 instead of judgmental of her world. She learns to shed the protective ego layer that was protecting her core wounds of abandonment, rejection, loss. This frees up greater creativity and sexuality and allows energy to flow. She discovers newfound creativity and sexual energy and allow her wild woman energy to emerge in her life again. She remembers her darker power of transmutation that can convert negative energy to positivity. And finally, she feels a newfound sense of self that is more authentic. Rebirth of energy and authentic self. After meeting 𝐥𝐢𝐤𝐤, 𝐸𝐚𝐺 retrieves her adornments, her staff, anklets, breastplate, ring of power and cloak, and rises back from the underworld into society where she is aligned with her true power. 𝐸𝐚𝐺 reenacts the cycle of Venus. Her journey to the underworld cave is the initiation point of a sacred descent. Hers is a quest for wholeness and for her original, wild truth which holds the consciousness of wholeness, the divine love of the divine feminine. In her planetary dance with the Earth around the Sun, Venus takes 52 years to orbit, and she does this in 5 cycles. Every 260 years she completes her cycle and begins again. Her cycles in the sky draw a luminous pattern of a divine rose. This pattern represents the journey of descent and ascension mirrored in the mythologies of Isis and Inanna, the great queens of heaven, telling the story of Venus. The story is usually of a divine feminine power or queen of heaven descending to earth to learn human lessons and practicing unconditional love, mercy, patience, forgiveness, as well as beauty, joy, passion and harmony. Originally, the energy is whole, then fragments only to find her light and once again become whole. This can be translated into a soul becoming fragmenting, then searching for its lost and separate parts through wounds and eventually integrating those parts into wholeness. This is ultimately the soul's journey. What has been separated? What has been lost? Our identity with divine love has been lost. Our belief that we are separate from divine love and the Divine Mother. As we search the earth for these lost parts of our soul, we meet lovers, create families, become governed by earthbound laws and societal orders. We become wounded through our fears of abandonment, loss, betrayal, humiliation, unworthiness and rejection. We carry these wounds with us as great blocks and burdens that become obstacles to the reunion with our divine nature, our divine selves. Descent into the cave prepares us for inner transformation. But rarely is transformation something we willingly choose. When we do choose it, the cave purifies us, cleanses our physical body, our physical world, our thoughts, emotions, beliefs, mentalities and perceptions. Our separation dissolves and is transcended from within when we unify our human/animal with the wise higher self. First through descent, initiation, then confrontation, later on emergence and resolution, then finally integration. This is the path of Venus, this is her heavenly wisdom symbolized on Earth. Through this alchemical purification process, we are able to release old emotional pain, blame, hurts, anger and control, egoic states that have kept us caged in the prison of our minds. And yet, this is the ultimate journey of wholeness, from descent to reunion and from separation to integration. That brings us to the end of today's video all about the Underworld Cave initiation. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to leave a thumbs up and to subscribe to Wild Feminine Magic for even more fascinating content, just like this. As always, thanks for watching. See you again soon in the next one.